The message traveled across the stars for 300 years before it reached the Cathari Dominion. It was old, broken in places, and carried the voice of a species that had disappeared from galactic records long ago. The Wanderers, they once called themselves. Conquerors who vanished without explanation. The message was simple. It said, "Do not go to the third planet of the Sol system. Do not approach Earth. It is not what it seems. It is a trap from which no empire returns unchanged." The High Council of the Cathari Dominion listened to this warning in their great chamber. 12 leaders sat in a circle, their gray skin marked with the tattoos of their conquered worlds. They had ruled over 200 planets. They had crushed rebellions and absorbed civilizations. They did not believe in traps they could not see. The Wanderers were weak, said High Counselor Mithra, the eldest among them. They disappeared because they lost their will to conquer. This message is nothing but the excuse of cowards. The others agreed. Earth was a small planet with primitive technology. Its people had not even mastered travel beyond their own moon. What threat could such a species pose to the greatest empire in the galaxy? They decided to send a scout fleet. 5 ships, 200 soldiers, and one of their finest commanders. His name was Viral. He had never failed a mission in 40 years of service. Commander Viral received his orders on the military station orbiting Keth Prime. He was tall even for his species. With sharp eyes that had seen the fall of civilizations, he read the mission details without emotion. Earth, assessment and preparation for conquest. Standard procedure. But before he could board his ship, an old scholar approached him in the corridor. The scholar's name was Torith, and he had spent his life studying the ancient records of the Dominion. Commander Torith said, his voice low, "May I speak with you privately?" Viral did not like delays, but he respected knowledge. He followed the scholar to a quiet corner. "I have studied the Wanderers," Torith said. "They were not weak, Commander. They were like us. Powerful, disciplined, ruthless. They sent a fleet to Earth 5 centuries ago. 50 ships. 10,000 soldiers. And they were destroyed?" Viral asked. "No," said Torith. "That is the strange part. They were not destroyed. They simply never came back. No battle records. No distress signals. They just stopped being conquerors." Viral considered this. "Perhaps they found nothing of value and moved on." "Perhaps," said Torith. "But their entire civilization changed after that mission. Within 1 generation, they abandoned conquest completely. They scattered across the galaxy and lived in peace. The greatest warriors in history became farmers and teachers and healers." "That sounds like weakness to me," Viral said. Torith shook his head slowly. "Or it sounds like they found something stronger than war. I do not know what happened on Earth, Commander, but I wanted you to know that the warning might be real." Viral thanked the scholar and continued to his ship. He did not believe in mysteries. He believed in facts, in strength, in the clear logic of conquest. Whatever happened to the Wanderers, it would not happen to him. The fleet departed the next morning. 5 warships cut through the darkness of space, their engines burning bright against the endless black. Inside the command vessel, Viral stood at the main view screen and watched the stars blur as they entered hyperspace. The journey took 18 days. During that time, Viral reviewed everything the Dominion knew about Earth. It was not much. A single planet with 1 moon, liquid water on the surface, atmosphere suitable for most species, population of 8 billion divided into many nations that often fought among themselves. Their technology was basic. Chemical rockets, primitive computers, no energy shields, no faster-than-light travel. By any measure, they were centuries behind the Dominion, and yet Earl found himself returning to one detail again and again. These humans had sent machines into space, carrying messages of greeting. They had put pictures of themselves, recordings of their music, and maps showing exactly where their planet was located. They had sent these messages in all directions, hoping someone would find them. This was not the behavior of a species preparing for war. This was something else. Something Viral did not have a word for. On the 19th day, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Viral stood on the bridge as Earth appeared on the view screen. A blue and green sphere, wrapped in white clouds, spinning slowly in the light of its yellow sun. "Commander," said Lieutenant Cross, his second in command, "we are detecting unusual activity. Weapons?" Viral asked. "No, sir. Communications. The planet is broadcasting thousands of signals into space. Radio waves, television transmissions, digital data. They are not encrypted. They are not hidden. Anyone can hear them." Viral frowned. "Show me." The bridge speakers filled with sound. Music unlike anything Viral had ever heard. Voices speaking in hundreds of different languages. Stories and news and conversations between people who had no idea. They were being heard across the stars, and then Cross found something else. A golden disc attached to an old spacecraft drifting at the edge of the system. The disc contained greetings in 55 languages, images of human life, and mathematical instructions for finding Earth. "They want to be found," Cross said quietly. "They are calling out to anyone who will listen." Viral stared at the blue planet on his screen. Every species he had ever conquered had tried to hide, to fight, to protect themselves. Every species had understood that the universe was dangerous and that survival meant strength. But these humans had built a golden invitation and thrown it into the darkness, hoping strangers would come. For the first time in his long career, Commander Viral felt something he could not name. It was not fear. It was not confusion. It was the small, uncomfortable feeling that everything he knew about the universe might be incomplete. "Move the fleet into orbit," he ordered. "We make contact tomorrow." That night, Viral stood alone in his quarters and watched Earth turn slowly below him. Lights glittered on the dark side of the planet, billions of lives going about their business. Unaware that their world had just become the focus of an empire, the Wanderers had called it a trap. The High Council had called it an easy conquest. But standing there in the silence of space, Viral wondered if it might be something else entirely. He did not know it yet. But his life had already begun to change. Commander Viral expected chaos. When his fleet revealed itself to Earth, he expected panic. Desperate military responses and primitive weapons firing uselessly at his ships. He had seen it 100 times on 100 worlds. Fear was always the first reaction. But Earth did not react with fear. Within 6 hours of the fleet's arrival, human governments were broadcasting messages into space. Not threats, not demands. They were sending greetings. They were asking questions. They wanted to know where the visitors came from and if they needed anything. Viral sat in his command chair and read the translations with growing confusion. One message from a group called the United Nations said, "We have waited our entire history for this moment. Welcome to Earth. We hope this is the beginning of friendship between our peoples." "This must be a trick," Lieutenant Cross said. "They are trying to lower our guard," perhaps Viral said, but he was not certain. He decided to proceed with the standard protocol. Land a small team, meet with local leaders, assess the population, and prepare for control. He selected 20 soldiers and took a shuttle down to the surface. The humans had suggested a meeting place, a large building in a city called Geneva, where their different nations gathered to talk. Viral landed his shuttle in an open field nearby and stepped out into Earth's air for the first time. It smelled different from any world he had known. Clean and complex, full of living things. The sky was a pale blue, and a yellow sun hung above the horizon. Humans had gathered at a distance, watching the shuttle with wide eyes. But they did not run. Some of them were even smiling. A woman walked toward Viral with calm, measured steps. She was small compared to him, with dark hair and bright eyes. She wore simple clothing and carried no weapons. "Commander Viral," she said. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I have been asked to serve as your guide and translator during your stay on Earth. Welcome to our planet." She extended her hand. Viral knew from his research that this was a human greeting, a sign of peaceful intention. He took her hand carefully, aware of how fragile human bones were compared to his own. "Dr. Chen," he said, "you do not seem afraid." She smiled. Should I be? My fleet could destroy your cities and ours, Viral said. Your weapons cannot harm us. By any reasonable measure, you should be terrified. Maybe, Sarah said. But we have spent thousands of years looking at the stars and wondering if anyone else was out there. Now we know the answer. That seems like a reason for hope, not fear. Viral did not know how to respond to this. He followed her into the building where representatives from human nations waited to meet him. The meetings were strange. Viral had expected to issue demands and receive submission. Instead, the humans asked him questions. They wanted to know about his homeworld, his culture, his people's history. They offered him food and drink. They showed him art and music from their different civilizations. One old man from a nation called Japan spent an hour explaining the meaning of a single poem. A woman from a place called Nigeria told him stories of her ancestors. A young scientist from Brazil asked if the Cathari had ever seen a supernova up close. None of them asked about his weapons. None of them asked what he wanted from Earth. They seemed genuinely curious about who he was. After 3 days, Viral ordered his soldiers to spread across the planet and gather information. They were supposed to identify military bases, resource deposits, and population centers. They were supposed to remain distant and professional. But something went wrong. Lieutenant Cross brought the first report after 1 week. Commander, we have a problem. Our soldiers are not following protocol, explained Viral said. They are accepting hospitality from the humans, sharing meals with them, visiting their homes. 3 soldiers attended something called a wedding yesterday. They danced. Viral felt his jaw tighten. This is unacceptable. Issue orders for stricter discipline. I have, Commander. The soldiers obey during duty hours. But in their free time, they keep returning to the humans. They say they want to understand them better. Viral dismissed Cross and sat alone in his quarters. He tried to understand what was happening. His soldiers were the finest warriors in the Dominion. They had conquered worlds without hesitation. Why were they being affected by these primitive people? That evening, Dr. Sarah Chen invited Viral to dinner at her home. He accepted, telling himself it was for intelligence gathering. Her home was small and warm. Her family was there. Her elderly mother, her younger brother, and 2 children who belonged to her brother. They welcomed Viral without fear, pulling out a chair for him and filling his plate with food. You must miss your family, Sarah's mother said to him. Being so far from home, Viral paused. No one had ever asked him about his feelings before. In the Dominion, soldiers did not discuss such things. I have duties, he said. Family is secondary. The old woman shook her head sadly. That sounds lonely. After dinner, the children asked Viral questions about space. They wanted to know if he had seen black holes and nebulas and other galaxies. They looked at him with wonder, not fear. When he left that night, they waved goodbye and asked him to come back soon. Walking back to his shuttle, Viral tried to analyze what he was feeling. These humans had no defenses against him. They knew he represented an empire that conquered worlds. And yet they had fed him, welcomed him, and treated him like a guest. It made no sense. It violated everything he understood about survival and strength. 2 weeks later, Cross came to him again. His face was troubled. Commander, I must report something. I attended an event called a baseball game yesterday. I did not plan to participate, but the humans invited me to sit with them, and they explained the rules, and they shared their food with me. When their team scored, I found myself celebrating with them. He paused, looking at the floor. I am not certain I can be objective about this mission anymore. Viral stared at his lieutenant. Cross had served with him for 20 years. He had never shown weakness. What is happening to us? Viral asked quietly. Cross looked up. I think, Commander, that we are learning something we were never taught. These humans, they are not strong in the way we understand strength, but they have something else. They connect with each other. They care about strangers. They share joy and food and stories with anyone who shows interest. He took a breath. I think that is their weapon, sir, and I do not know how to fight it. That night, Viral reviewed the personnel reports. 60% of his soldiers had formed personal relationships with humans. Many had requested permission to extend their stay. Some had asked about the possibility of bringing their families to visit Earth. His invasion force was dissolving. Not a single shot had been fired. Viral thought of the Wanderer's warning. Earth is a trap from which no empire returns unchanged. He finally understood what they meant. The trap was not weapons or tricks or hidden defenses. The trap was the humans themselves. Their openness, their warmth, their strange, impossible willingness to welcome strangers into their lives. And Commander Viral, conqueror of 12 worlds, was already caught. 6 weeks on Earth had changed Commander Viral in ways he could not measure. He still wore his uniform. He still commanded his fleet. But something inside him had shifted. Like a bone that had healed at a wrong angle and now ached with every step. His soldiers were changing too. They still followed orders during official duties, but their hearts were no longer in the mission. They asked questions they had never asked before. Why do we conquer? What do we gain? Is there another way? One morning, a young soldier named Teth approached Viral in the corridor of the command ship. Teth had been one of his most disciplined warriors, silent and efficient. Now he looked troubled. "Commander, may I ask you something?" Viral nodded. "Yesterday, I was in a human city. I saw a man collapse on the street. He was a stranger to everyone around him. But within seconds, 5 humans ran to help him. They did not know him. They would receive nothing for helping, but they did it anyway." Teth paused. "What kind of species does that?" Viral had no answer. That afternoon, Dr. Sarah Chen invited him to experience more of human culture. She said she wanted him to understand her people before he made any decisions about their future. Viral agreed, though he was no longer sure what decisions he would make. Sarah took him to a small town far from any major city. The buildings were old and simple. The streets were quiet. People moved slowly here, stopping to talk with neighbors and watch children play. "This is where I grew up," Sarah said. "My family has lived here for 5 generations." She introduced him to people she had known her whole life. The baker who made bread fresh every morning. The teacher who had taught her as a child. The old farmer who still worked his land at 80 years old. Each of them welcomed Viral with handshakes and smiles. That evening, Sarah took him to her family home for a larger gathering. There were aunts and uncles, cousins and neighbors, all crowded into a small house. They laughed and argued and told stories. Children ran between the adults, stealing food from plates and being chased with mock anger. Viral stood in the corner and watched. In the Dominion, meals were efficient. You ate what you needed and returned to your duties. There was no laughter, no stories, no children running free. Sarah's grandmother approached him. She was very old, her face covered in wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp. "You look confused," she said. "I am trying to understand," Viral admitted. "In my culture, we do not gather like this. We do not share meals with so many people. Then what do? We work. We serve the Dominion. We conquer." The old woman tilted her head. "And does that make you happy?" Viral opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. He had never been asked that question. Happiness was not a concept the Dominion valued. Duty was what mattered. Strength, victory. "I do not know," he said finally. The grandmother smiled and patted his arm. "Then you have already learned something important." The next morning, Viral walked through the town alone. He watched a mother comfort a crying child. He watched 2 old men playing a game on a wooden board, arguing good-naturedly about the rules. He watched a young couple walk hand in hand, looking at each other as if no one else existed. These humans lived with so much uncertainty. Their lives were short. Their planet was fragile. They had no empire to protect them, no fleets to conquer their enemies. And yet they seemed content. They seemed alive in a way his own people were not. He returned to his ship that evening and found Lieutenant Cross waiting for him. "Commander, I need to speak with you privately." They went to Viral's quarters and sealed the door. Cross stood at attention, but his eyes were troubled. I can no longer serve this mission, Cross said. I have tried to remain loyal. I have tried to remember my duty. But I cannot look at these humans and see enemies anymore. I see people who have something we lost, or perhaps something we never had. Viral sat down heavily. What would you have me do? I do not know, Cross admitted. But I know that if we conquer this world, we will destroy something precious. Something that might be more valuable than any resource we could extract. Before Viral could respond, his communication console lit up with an urgent signal. It was from the High Council, the highest authority in the Dominion. He opened the channel and saw the face of High Counselor Methra. Commander Viral, your assessment has taken too long. We have reviewed the data you sent. Earth is weak. Its resources are valuable. You are ordered to begin Phase 2 immediately. Viral's throat tightened. Phase 2. Subjugation and resource extraction. Establish control over their population centers. Remove any leadership that resists. Use force as necessary. Counselor, I must advise caution. The situation here is more complex than this is not a discussion, Commander. This is an order. The Dominion does not negotiate with primitive species. Begin Phase 2 within 40 hours, or you will be relieved of command. The screen went dark. Viral sat in silence for a long time. Cross stood beside him, waiting. What will you do? Cross asked finally. I do not know, Viral said. But I know that I cannot follow those orders. Yet. Not until I understand. That night, Viral did something he had never done before. He used his communication systems to search for the Wanderers. The species that had sent the warning, the conquerors who had abandoned conquest. He needed to know what they had found on Earth. He needed to know if there was another way. The search took hours, but eventually he found them. A small colony on a distant world, living quietly among the stars. He sent them a message, identifying himself and asking for contact. The reply came the next morning. It was a single line of text. We have been waiting for someone like you. Come, and we will tell you everything. Viral looked at the message for a long time. Then he made a decision. He would go to the Wanderers. He would learn their secret. And then he would decide what to do about Earth. He told no one except Cross. If the High Council learned what he was doing, they would call it treason. But Viral no longer cared about labels. He cared about truth. As his shuttle left orbit, he looked back at the blue planet below. Somewhere down there, Sarah Chen was going about her day, surrounded by family and friends, living a life that made no sense by Dominion standards, but was somehow more complete than anything Viral had ever known. He would return. He was not sure how or when, but he would return. He owed these strange, beautiful people that much. The Wanderers lived on a small green world at the edge of explored space. Viral's shuttle descended through clouds and landed in a valley surrounded by flowering trees. The air was sweet and warm. He had expected to find warriors, ancient soldiers hiding from the galaxy, bitter about their lost empire. Instead, he found gardens and children and homes built for comfort rather than defense. An elder waited for him at the edge of the landing field. He was tall and thin, with silver hair and calm eyes. His name was Sarath, and he had been a commander once, just like Viral. Welcome, Sarath said. We knew someone would come eventually. We just did not know when. Viral followed him through the settlement. Everywhere he looked, he saw peace. Families worked in gardens. Children played in open fields. No one carried weapons. No one stood guard. You are conquerors, Viral said. The greatest in the galaxy. What happened to you? Sarath smiled sadly. Earth happened to us. They sat together in Sarath's home, a simple building with large windows that let in the afternoon light. Sarath poured them both cups of warm tea, a drink he said he had learned to love from the humans. 500 years ago, I led a fleet to Earth, Sarath began. 50 ships, 10,000 soldiers. We were going to add another world to our empire. It should have been easy. The humans had no technology to stop us. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong, Sarath said. Everything went right. And that was the problem, he explained slowly, choosing his words with care. When the wanderers arrived at Earth, they had expected the same reaction they'd always received: fear, resistance, attempts at negotiation from a position of weakness. But the humans were different. They welcomed us, Sorath said. Not with submission, but with genuine curiosity. They wanted to know who we were, where we came from, what our music sounded like, and what foods we enjoyed. They did not see us as conquerors. They saw us as visitors from the stars. Errol nodded. He had experienced the same thing. First we thought it was a trick. We stayed alert, waiting for the trap to spring. But days passed, then weeks, then months. The humans kept treating us with kindness. They shared their homes with our soldiers. They taught us their languages and listened when we taught them ours. Sorath set down his cup and looked at Vyro directly. We did not know how to fight kindness, Commander. Our entire civilization was built on strength and fear. We conquered because we believed the universe was hostile, that survival meant domination. But these humans lived by different rules. They reached out to strangers. They helped those who could offer nothing in return. They built communities based on trust rather than power. That sounds like weakness, Viral said, though his voice carried no conviction. That is what we thought too, but we were wrong. Sorath leaned forward. The humans are not weak, Commander. They are the bravest species in the galaxy. Every day they choose connection over isolation. Every day they open their hearts to people who might hurt them. That is not weakness. That is courage we could never match. Vyro was silent for a long moment. So what happened? Why did you stop conquering? Because we realized that our empire was empty, Sorath said. We had 200 worlds under our control. We had fleets that could destroy stars. But we had no joy, no peace. No real connection with anyone, not even our own families. We were alone in a universe we had made hostile through our own choices. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the valley below. The humans showed us another way. We stayed on Earth for 3 years. We learned to share meals like they did, to celebrate like they did, to care for each other like they did. And when we finally left, we were no longer the same species. The other wanderers accepted this change. Not immediately. But enough of us had been transformed that we could not return to conquest. It felt wrong now. It felt like a betrayal of everything we had learned. Soreth turned back to Vyro. We scattered across the galaxy and started new lives. We became farmers and teachers and healers. We found purpose in building rather than destroying. And the warning you sent? We sent it because we knew other empires would find Earth eventually. We hoped they would listen. But we also knew that some things cannot be explained. They must be experienced. Vyral sat with this information for a long time. Everything Sorath said matched his own experience. Earth had not attacked him or tricked him. It had simply shown him a different way of living, a way that made conquest seem small and meaningless. But there was a problem. The Dominion has sent a fleet, Vyral said. 50 warships under Admiral Thessa. They will arrive at Earth in days. They have orders to conquer by any means necessary. Soreth's expression grew grave. Thessa, I have heard of her. She is a hardliner. She will not be swayed easily. Is there anything I can do? Any way to stop this? You cannot stop a fleet, Commander, but perhaps you do not need to. Sorath placed a hand on Viral's shoulder. The humans changed us, and we were the greatest conquerors in history. Perhaps they can change Thessa too, and if they cannot, Sorath was quiet for a moment. Then I hope enough of your soldiers have been transformed as you have been. Sometimes, empires fall not from outside attack, but from within. When enough people stop believing in conquest, conquest becomes impossible. Vyro returned to his shuttle that evening. He had the answers he needed, but they brought no comfort. A fleet was coming to Earth. People he cared about were in danger, and he had no weapons that could help them. As his shuttle rose into the sky, Sorrow's final words echoed in his mind. Go back to Earth, Commander. Stand with the humans. Show your people that there is another way. That is the only weapon that matters. Vyral set his course and pushed the engines to maximum speed. He would reach Earth before the fleet arrived. He did not know if he could make any difference, but he had to try. He owed the humans that much. He owed himself that much. For the first time in his life, Commander Viral was not fighting for the Dominion. He was fighting for something he actually believed in. He just hoped he was not too late. The Dominion fleet arrived at Earth on a clear morning. 50 warships darkened the sky like a swarm of metal insects. Their weapons could level cities in minutes. Their soldiers numbered in the thousands. Commander Viral watched them from the surface, standing beside Dr. Sarah Chen and Lieutenant Cross. His own small fleet was nothing compared to the force above. If Admiral Thesa decided to attack, there was nothing he could do to stop her. "They look angry," Sarah said quietly. "They are confused," Viral replied. "Confusion often looks like anger in my people." Within hours, a shuttle descended from the flagship. Admiral Thesa stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time. She was tall and severe, with scars on her face from battles won long ago. Her eyes swept across the landing field with cold calculation. She saw Viral's soldiers standing alongside humans. Some had removed their rank insignias. Some were talking with human families who had come to watch the landing. One Cathari warrior was holding a human child on his shoulders so the little girl could see better. "What is this?" Thesa demanded. "Commander Viral, explain why your soldiers are fraternizing with the enemy." "They are not the enemy, Admiral." Thesa's eyes narrowed. "The High Council has declared them subjects of the Dominion. That makes them whatever we decide they are."
Aye.
"The High Council is wrong." The words hung in the air like smoke. Viral had never spoken against the Council in his life. But standing on Earth, surrounded by people he had come to respect, he could not pretend anymore. "You have been compromised," Thesa said. "I should have expected this." The warning spoke of a trap. "Clearly you have fallen into it." "Yes," Viral said simply. "I have, and I am grateful for it." Thesa stared at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. She turned to her guards. "Place the commander under arrest. Take control of his fleet. We proceed with Phase 2 immediately." But before the guards could move, Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward. "Admiral Thesa," she said calmly, "my name is Sarah Chen. I have been working with Commander Viral during his time on Earth. May I speak with you?" Thesa looked at the small human woman with something like amusement. "You wish to negotiate? You have nothing to bargain with. I am not offering to negotiate. I am offering to show you our world. 1 hour. No guards. Just the two of us. After that, you can make whatever decision you think is right." "This is ridiculous," Thesa said. "I have conquered 40 worlds. I do not need to understand your people to control them." "Perhaps not," Sarah said. But Commander Viral thought the same thing when he arrived. He agreed to walk with me anyway. He is a different person now. Thesa glanced at Viral. There was truth in what the human said. Viral had changed. Something had broken him, or perhaps fixed him. Either way, he was no longer the commander she had read about in reports. Against her own judgment, Thesa agreed. She told herself it was to understand the enemy's tactics. She told herself it was intelligence gathering. But part of her was simply curious. Sarah led her through the streets of a nearby city. It was morning, and people were going about their daily lives. They walked past a hospital where doctors treated patients from all backgrounds. Sarah explained that humans cared for the sick regardless of their wealth or status. They walked past a school where children learned about the universe. The children had drawn pictures of aliens and spaceships, imagining the friends they might meet among the stars. Their drawings showed humans and aliens standing together, smiling. They walked past a memorial for a human war, a great conflict that had killed millions. Sarah explained that humans built these memorials not to celebrate victory, but to remember loss. They promised never again at each one. They did not always keep that promise, but they always made it. Finally, Sarah took her to a community center where people gathered to help strangers. Volunteers served food to those who had none. Neighbors repaired homes for the elderly who could not do it themselves. Children played together, their laughter filling the air. "Why do they do this?" Thesa asked. They receive nothing in return. They receive everything in return, Sarah said. Connection, purpose, the knowledge that they are not alone in the universe. Thesa stood in silence for a long time. She watched an old human woman hand a cup of soup to a young man who could barely afford shoes. The young man thanked her with tears in his eyes. The old woman smiled and patted his hand. When Thesa returned to the landing field, her guards were waiting. Viral stood among his soldiers, prepared for a rest. Sarah walked beside the admiral, her face calm. "Admiral," one of her officers said, "shall we proceed with Phase 2? Thesa did not answer immediately. She stood very still, looking at the blue sky and the green land and the humans who watched her without hatred. "Open a channel to the High Council," she said finally. Her officers obeyed. The face of High Counselor Mithra appeared on the portable screen. "Admiral Thesa, report. Is Earth secured?" "No," Thesa said. "Earth cannot be conquered." Mithra's expression hardened. "Explain yourself. These humans have no weapons that can harm us. They have no defenses we cannot break. But if we stay here, we will become like them. We will learn their ways. We will question everything we believe." She paused. The Wanderer's warning was accurate. Earth is a trap. Not for bodies, but for minds. For hearts. "This is unacceptable," Mithra said. "I am ordering you to. I am withdrawing the fleet," Thesa interrupted. "Any soldier who wishes to remain on Earth may do so. I will not force them to leave a place that offers them something the Dominion never could." She ended the transmission. The officers around her stared in shock. Several reached for their weapons, unsure what to do. But before any conflict could begin, something unexpected happened. Soldiers began stepping forward, not to arrest Thesa, but to stand beside Viral. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Cathari warriors who had spent weeks on Earth, who had eaten with humans and laughed with them and learned their names. "We are staying," one soldier said. "This is where we belong now." Thesa looked at the crowd of her own people choosing Earth over the Dominion. She had seen rebellions before. She had crushed them without mercy. But this was not a rebellion. This was a choice. A peaceful, quiet choice that was more powerful than any weapon. She nodded slowly. "Then stay. Build something better than what we had. Perhaps that is what the universe needs." The fleet departed that day, but not all the ships left. Some remained in orbit, their crews requesting permission to visit the surface. Over the following months, Earth became something new. Not a conquered world. Not a Dominion outpost. Something else entirely. They called it a sanctuary. A place where any species could come not to conquer, but to learn, to connect, to find what they had lost. 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Chen stood at a spaceport, watching ships from a dozen different species land on Earth. Beside her stood Viral. No longer a commander, no longer wearing any uniform, just a person who had found a home. A young Cathari child ran past them, chasing a human friend. Their laughter echoed across the field. "Called it a trap," Viral said softly, "because we did not have a word for what it really was." Sarah looked at him. "What would you call it now?" Viral watched the children play, watched the ships bringing visitors from across the galaxy. Watched the humans welcome each stranger as if they were family. "Home," he said. "I think you would call it home." Sarah smiled and took his hand. They stood together as the sun set over Earth. Painting the sky in colors that no other world could match, the Dominion had sent fleets to conquer this small blue planet. They had failed. Not because humans fought back, but because humans reached out. They offered something no weapon could destroy. They offered belonging, and in the end, that was enough to change everything.